Hey everybody, welcome to the channel. I'm Fox, and today I wanted to discuss the major differences, strengths and disadvantages with In Sync versus Optimist. I've started playing the game mostly from TUA onwards, so year 2 when Warlords came out, and back then Optimist was the talent of choice, and then In Sync came out, which offered a larger damage buff right from pretty much the second bullet of the mag, and has since become the single best damage talent in the game. And in fact, up until Capacitor was released, it was even the best talent on a skill build as well. And this is why I've sort of mentioned in previous videos that I do think In Sync needs a bit of a tune. You know, a talent that is not only the best for weapon-based builds, but skill-based builds as well, and comfortably outdamages other talents, pretty much every other talent, and means that it does need bringing in just a little bit to give other talents a choice. However, I do think that Optimist still has a place in the game. I've been using it more and more lately, and there are certain places and scenarios where Optimist will actually outperform In Sync. And what I'm going to do today is discuss those differences. We'll have a quick look at some damage numbers in the firing range, and then I'm going to load into a PvP conflict game, solo queue, on my standard 6 red spotter build that you see before you, with an Optimist carbine 7, as you wouldn't use Optimist on a low rate of fire weapon such as the FAL. The reason that I am showing you two FALs today is that the damage is identical. So if you look at the one you see in front of you, this is my In Sync version and my favourite AR in the game. I've been using this ever since I got it months and months ago, and it is just ridiculously powerful. This is the In Sync variant. If you go over to my other FAL, you'll notice that the health damage is lower, but that's irrelevant because versus armour the damage will be identical, and you know, enemy shields and enemy agents for the most part will just be armour, particularly if they have a healer or armour regen, which doesn't affect the health. So yeah, the damage will be the same. You can see that it's 136.3k, 136.3k, but of course the only real difference is Optimist on the SA58, and on the standard one with the wooden furniture we have In Sync. So let's discuss the talents first of all. Let's have a look at what the description states. In Sync, hitting an enemy grants 15% skill damage for 5 seconds. The second part, which is the most important part, particularly those first 3 words, using a skill or damaging an enemy with a skill grants 15% weapon damage for 5 seconds. Now that by itself is fantastic because it's just 15% more weapon damage simply for using a skill, which, for those of you that don't know, the Crusader Shield is by far the most efficient prop for In Sync because you can just keep redeploying it. The bottom part states that the damage increases are actually doubled whilst both buffs are active at the same time. So that's a 30% increase in weapon damage by simply deploying a shield and firing into an enemy, which for the most part people would do anyway. It's just free damage and it is ridiculously strong. That will last for 5 seconds as well, which is easily as long as it takes to empty the mag on pretty much anything outside of an LMG. So your entire mag will just be 30% stronger, bar maybe the very first bullet. Let's look at Optimist now. So Optimist, pretty simple. Weapon damage is increased by 3% for every 10% ammo missing from the magazine. So this does indeed hit 30%, but only in the final 10%, which for something like the FAL, and just to reiterate this point, you would not use Optimist on a FAL because it is way too low rate of fire, and people will just get into cover before you're anywhere near your max damage. But it's only in the final 4 bullets, as it's a 40 mag weapon for this, this particular option, that you would have 30%. So 4 bullets of 30% versus 40 bullets, or technically 39 at 30%. Well, In Sync is the obvious winner, right? Not necessarily. I think overall, with all the damage testing I've done and figuring out where Optimist is stronger and weaker versus In Sync is still definitely the best talent in the game. So I don't want this video to sort of say you all need to be using Optimist because it's secretly better. No, it isn't. But in certain situations, it is. And what we're now going to do is a quick damage test in the firing range, and then I'm going to show you some places in here as well, or some scenarios should I say, where Optimist is better and where In Sync is better. Let's get started. So what I've done is essentially set up an armoured invulnerable target just here, as I don't want the damage numbers to be skewed if we're firing into health, as one of my guns has lower damage to health. As I said before, that's not a very important stat in PvP at all. If somebody's in health and they're still visible, you're going to kill them. So yes, having more is always better, but it is not a necessity. And if you ever got a weapon roll just like this with the health damage not maxed but the assault and damage maxed, that's perfect. You could absolutely use that and hit the same sort of damage numbers. So what we're going to do first is have a look. I've got the In Sync version in my hand. We're going to have a look at the base damage. So I'm just going to pulse this target. Just don't forget, if you're ever testing spotter in the firing range, aiming at the target doesn't do it. You have to sort of aim above it. Actually, it kind of did there, which is a bit weird. But these you've got to aim at the bottom, essentially where they deploy from. You see that? Same here, just aim at the top. So the base damage, the crit is 677. and the non-crit is 249. Actually, now that we have our Coyotes proc, let's just redo that. 739, 249. Now let's proc In Sync. 832 and 280. So 832k per bullet and 280 with In Sync proc, which is obviously quite a large uptake from the lower numbers. Let's now go to the Optimist version, which I've made the gun bright pink to make it easier to see. We now have the 0 on the side of my gun, indicating that as we get ramped up, the damage increases. But just looking at the first few bullets to start with, so we already know that In Sync hit 832 crit and 280 non-crit. 739, 250. So this is quite a fair bit lower. You know, it's not a huge difference in PvP because the numbers are reduced, but it is still less damage. Of course, as we fire, these get higher. So if we get to the final, let's just test the numbers here. That's versus health. 270 now, 271, 807. That pulsed. Now we're coming up to the final few here, so don't forget that the In Sync version was 832k per crit from the second bullet onwards. We're still only up to 822 in the final 10% here. So 825, 827. 832. So there we go. On the very final bullet where we hit 10, only then did we get the 832, the very same number that we hit on the In Sync variant. That was the last bullet in the mag. So if I could fire 40 bullets, or let's say 39, because the first one doesn't count, at 832 versus just one, well, In Sync seems better, doesn't it? Let's have a look at some places where In Sync is not so good. So the main weakness of In Sync is that you need to use a skill. If you look at my buff bar now, it's kind of hidden by the normal world setting, but you can see I've got Coyotes and Vigilance active. If I was to fire this gun at an enemy, it's the wrong gun, doesn't help. You see I've now got the In Sync symbol, and if I bring out a skill, I've now got all three, indicating that the 15% is active for weapon and skill, and as they're active at the same time, the 30% is there. So what you essentially need to do with every fight is to deploy your skill. Now the weakness of this is, well, with the shield, which is really the only way you can proc In Sync reliably, there are a few weaknesses. First of all, shields take a ton of additional damage now, so they do not last long. Secondly, you need to deploy your shield at the start of a fight to get In Sync ready from basically the first to second bullet, and that means it's going to break very early, which, you know, if you need it towards the end of the fight, you're not going to have it. You then also don't have a very reliable In Sync proc, and you'll need to use your secondary skill. There are skills that can keep In Sync up constantly, such as the Stinger Hive and the Drone, but these are going to get shot out very quickly, and whilst they are effective initially, they are certainly not effective in a longer fight. The other disadvantage is, with something like an Optimist weapon, you can play your corners very well. For those that don't know, you always hold your weapon up to your right eye, so you want to always be covered. If you're in an archway like this and enemies are coming down from this long walkway, you never want to be on the right side because more of your body will be exposed, and that's actually quite easily tested by walking up to this sort of platform here as close as I can get, and then seeing where I can't shoot to where I can. So we're blocked at the moment. It's going to let me come out. There we go. So I'm going to hit that from there. That's it. But if you do it from the left side, you can essentially have a lot more. Actually, that looks about the same, to be fair. Well, essentially speaking, because you're aiming from the right side of your right shoulder and the gun is in your right eye, you are essentially more hidden on left cover. It's a little bit hard to demonstrate here. You can't really see kind of where I'm hiding, but you will notice it in the conflict gameplay that I show you. Now, if you're rocking a shield, you're on this left cover, which is always where you should be. So always try and take the left-hand side cover if you can. You know, you're minimising the exposure of your own body while still seeing all of theirs. If you need to deploy a shield, this makes you way more visible because the shield takes up an area larger than yourself. Enemies can shoot this, they can get their own talents procced, they can break your shield very quickly before you've even had a chance to come out, and then as you come out to fire into them, or even if you stay there, because they can see more of you as your shield is visible, they're going to break that very quickly, which will stagger you, and that then means you don't have an In Sync proc for the next, I don't know, 15, 20 seconds or whatever it is. So shields are a great way to proc it, but they absolutely expose you. What's worse is if you're on the right corner, the shield only has a place to rest your gun on the right side of it, so it automatically puts you over your right shoulder. This now means I'd have to do this. And I mean, let's just see how far that has to go over from the right cover. So essentially, massively more exposed from the right side and partially more exposed from the left side. Now with an Optimist weapon, you can really sort of minimise, you know, that exposure. If you look where I'm placed here, I'm almost perfectly behind it. If you look at the line from that barricade there, that divider, it's only really my arm and my foot that are just barely sticking over the edge. But I wouldn't have that luxury with the shield because it takes up all this extra space that's sticking out, and it will get broken. With Optimist, I can literally just peek like this, and I don't need to do anything. So the advantage of Optimist is you can sit in cover and you don't need to proc a skill. You can just fire straight away. But if I was in cover with an In Sync build, and let's say I had a shield and a decoy, well, I would have no choice but to do this. I could redeploy and get back into cover, but that's like half a second wasted where you could just be firing into them. Now, yes, you could argue that that half a second is worth it as you're getting 30% right from the get-go, but a lot of the time, if you're on a high damage build, people will get into cover quickly, and if you're not maximising the time that you can damage them, which with an Optimist build, if somebody was running down here and they didn't see me, I could just pop out, get loads of shots into them, and get away again. If I have to do this, that's that split-second delay. It leaves me visible, and they could just break my shield or get a snipe on me, or even worse, get a sticky bomb shot on me as well, because this is all time that you're in the fight, essentially for longer, where you're not firing. So yes, In Sync is still better, and it is definitely the best talent in the game. Don't let me take away from that, but it does have its weaknesses as well. On the plus side, any skill can proc it. So what you could do if you're sat in cover is just run a booster hive, which is what I like to do on certain maps and in certain dark zones. If I drop this, I've got In Sync instantly procced. Oh, I've got the right weapon on, so I can just drop this on the floor. You see I was at those 832 crits there. So yeah, you know, there are ways around it, but it still doesn't take away from the fact that if you're going to use your shield for In Sync, which everybody does, it isn't as good. So Optimist has less damage, but you can use it in more places. You can sit in cover and easily hit fire. If your shield and your skill breaks, if you are disrupted is another great one as well. Anything like that, you can just use it all the time and it will just work all of the time. Yes, it is less damage, and yes, it takes a bit of time to ramp up, but it definitely has its strengths versus teams that can disrupt you, versus places where you need to sit in cover, and also in places where you're getting rushed, where you can't really afford to get your shield out because it's just going to break straight away and stagger you. You just need to fire as quick and as fast as possible in order to get as much damage before they get close to you. And then when they do get close to you with something like Optimist, you're already going to be getting close to that 30%. What I'm going to do is go through a conflict game with my usual 6 red spotter build. So if you do want to have a quick look at that, I will run through this build very quickly, and then we're going to load into that game. So the stats for both of the previous weapons were the same, but on my standard 6 red Optimist build, I do run a Carbine 7 and a Vector 45 ACP. The reason I run the Carbine is it is a higher rate of fire than the FAL, and therefore Optimist gets its max stacks faster. However, I still think this isn't the best weapon for it. You really need to be looking at 800 RPM and higher, just due to the fact that a lot of better players will simply not be out of cover for that long, and you want to be firing as many bullets in that small window as possible. So my top choices for Optimist are obviously the Shield Splinterer, as it is the named version with 40% instead of 30%, but you also have the Police M4 and the FAMAS that are really, really strong. For Optimist. The CTAR and the F2000 also get an honourable mention, but essentially any weapon that is 800 RPM or higher. I really like the Carbine because that has great base handling, stability, a nice reload speed. It's just a good weapon, and it looks pretty cool as well, so that's pretty important. Once again, you can see this is rolled to max damage and max damage to targets out of cover. I couldn't care less about the health damage, it's still pretty high. And then of course we have Optimist on here. The Vector is exactly the same. This is damage to armor, unfortunately, but that's still not a bad talent. It's just lower than the 10% that we get from damage to targets out of cover. We still have Optimist on here. This is one of the best Optimist weapons in the game, as it has very high base bullet damage for a 1200 RPM. A very small mag, admittedly, which kind of holds it back a little bit. But because it's a 1200 RPM weapon, you get through those Optimist stacks very quickly, and it actually works quite well. We are running the Coyote's Mask to give us the... Sorry, I just realised the background isn't great here. So yeah, we are running the Coyote's Mask to give us the additional 10% crit chance and 10% crit damage. With a lot of AR builds, I like to set a 50% chance, so that way if they're at range, I go up to 60 with a 15 to 25 meter bonus, and if they're up close, I get the 25% critical hit damage, but I'm still critting 50% of the time. For me, that 50% is a sweet spot on any Coyote's build, and I'd highly recommend that you aim for the same thing. We're running a Seska chest, which is luckily triple god roll with a spotter talent, again my favourite talent in the game, and because this is a long underbarrel rail, we are able to equip the linked laser pointer from Technician, which gives us the ability to pulse our targets. This is of course crit chance and crit damage, which every single piece needs to be rolled into, and being a Seska, it gives us that 10% crit chance as the brand set bonus. We're running a Grupo for the 15% critical hit damage bonus, once again rolled to high weapon damage, crit chance and crit damage. As is the case with any build that you need to do a lot of damage on, we're running Fox's Prayer and Contractors. These are just a necessity for the most part. These are rolled to crit damage at each, and of course we gain 8% damage to targets out of cover from Foxes, and 8% damage to armour, which are both multiplicative stats that pair really well with Spotter and with Optimist or In Sync. Finally, we're running a Fenris backpack, as having a Fenris on any piece is very important if you're running an AR. This gives us 10% assault rifle damage, but I've also got this rolled to weapon damage, crit chance and crit damage, and this is a Vigilance backpack. Vigilance is great, as particularly with higher rate of fire weapons, you get down more of your damage faster, before they shoot you, losing the Vigilance buff. So Vigilance is, from a percentage point of view, affecting more of your damage. More of your bullets are being fired with a faster rate of fire weapon with Vigilance active. If you're firing for 1 second with a FAL versus 1 second with a carbine, it could be something like 90% of your mag is emptied in 1 second on a carbine versus maybe only 40% on a FAL. So if you can proc Vigilance for 90% of the mag versus 40%, you would naturally choose the 90%. So Vigilance on a high rate of fire weapon is actually a really good talent, because quite simply for that reason, you're getting more of your damage out before they have a chance to shoot you, which just equates to a better use of the talent. So with all of the crit damage mods and crit chance mods and everything that I have rolled onto this build, my stats are as follows. We're sat at 49% exactly crit chance, which with the Coyote's mid-range buff will go up to 59, and then we're looking at 171.2 crit damage, which if they are close range, that's going to go very close to 200%. Obviously very high for an AR build. Headshot damage is the default value. We've got lots of damage to armor on here, and damage to targets out of cover is 18%, which it doesn't show, and the rest of my stats are just based on the max watch level. The standard 726k armor, no armor on killer armor regen as we're using Technician, all the standard Hasbro stuff from the max watch. The Technician is of course a necessity for Spotter for the Link Laser Underbarrel, otherwise you may just want to consider using Firewall, Sharpshooter or Gunner. They will be my top 3 choices for a standard AR build. Skills are of course the shield. Now even though this is an Optimist build, as I showed you earlier in the how it works section of the video, this is still great with Optimist, as you can now deploy it much later in the fight, when your damage really starts to ramp up and your health starts to get lower, as opposed to using it early in the fight with In Sync and it breaking too soon, therefore leaving you exposed. This is now, instead of a damage proc, it is a get out of jail free card, and I won't use this to start with unless I'm sort of convinced that they're already aiming where I'm about to appear. I'll fire at them first, and only when they turn around to start firing at me will I whip this out, just giving me that extra health. Of course it breaks very quickly, but it is still a great feature even without In Sync. You just don't have to use it early, which gives you a lot more sort of flexible play. And then the decoy, just because I'm a 6 red build, and this just keeps me off of radar so I can run around and hopefully get some good flank kills. But you could use a booster hive here, an EMP jammer, a striker drone if you preferred it for the In Sync, whatever you're more comfortable with. So what we'll now do is load into the game, and I will show you exactly how, hopefully, this build performs well. Right, so here we are on Georgetown. So just to clarify, I'm using exactly the same build we just looked at with a carbine on Optimist. Again, I'm not necessarily suggesting this is the best weapon for Optimist, but it is just a great... I think personally it's the best all-round AR in the game. It's by no means the highest DPS, but it's definitely above average. Its handling stats and reload stats are, about average or a bit higher, and it has pretty good range as well. So it is just a good sort of all-round weapon.
Rogue Stinger Hive detected.
So again here I don't need to worry about using my shield. Oof, couldn't quite get the aim assist on that guy because I was shooting through my decoy. But you see here I can play my corners so much better with Optimist and just get the free damage anyway. Whereas with an In Sync build I would have to proc that skill. And what I can do here is use my corners, use the C79 crit chance scope to zoom in. Oh, and just instantly laser that guy. Use my left corner here to get the more of my body. Oh, are you actually using an artillery turret, my dude? Really? Okay, welcome to EU servers, boys and girls. And this is where damage to health actually is pretty good, because it can laser these turrets down. That was interesting, that fired after he left? After it broke? Oh, my boys are going in. I like your style. Oh, let's all go in. So yeah, the damage there, if I was with my In Sync build, I'd have to proc the shield, bringing me out of cover, which would just expose me for a longer period of time, and that could be absolutely fine. Oh, hello, buddy. Again, I can play my corner here. If you try and bring out a shield here, well, let me demonstrate it. You try looking right down, it's super hard. You just can't see much. But if I'm just doing this, I can play my corners much better. And because I don't need the shield for In Sync, as I'm using Optimist. So yeah, you know, positioning is definitely better with Optimist. You can really abuse corner peeking, particularly if you play a left corner like this, as opposed to a right corner like this.
Boost about to activate.
I can't believe they're using it. You all know, well, I say you all know, my long-term subscribers know my absolute distaste for any kind of skill build in PvP. I'm not a fan of them at all, particularly mortar turrets and status.
An agent needs assistance.
So there I could use a shield because I was low health, so now I'm actually quite keen on bringing it out. Can't see anything because my teammate's in there. Wait, are they red shielded? They are red shielded, oh, unlucky. Yeah, so that was the great thing there. If I'd have used my shield at the start, I wouldn't have had it. And you see I've only got half of my armour left, so I could use it in the later stages of those fight, because I don't need it for In Sync. I can purely use it for keeping myself alive, which is the whole point of a shield. But if you don't want to use that, you don't have to. You could run, one of my old favourites for my old Optimus builds was a Jammer Pulse and a Booster Hive, so I could essentially get rid of all skills and cleanse my teammates of any status, because status is a big problem in this game at the moment, and that combo just pretty much nullifies it. What I'm essentially doing here is just not wasting my time pulling shields in and out all the time, exposing myself. Oh, there's a guy behind me, so I'm going to run away from that. That is not good for my health. Looks like my boys are on him, so I'm going to focus these dudes down here. Okay, I've literally done nothing this game, but this is more just a test to show you where Optimist can absolutely work. So if I'd have gone in here and got red shield and lost all of my skills, I wouldn't have to worry about that there, because obviously In Sync doesn't, you know, well, would need that, but oh, I didn't quite get into cover in time there. So what I should have done there is brought my shield out. But again, if I didn't have it, I wouldn't have been able to do that, so I didn't do it anyway because I'm an idiot. So pretty quick gameplay there. I didn't really do much except my team just destroyed those mortar turret users. But yeah, like I said before, this was all just to show you where Optimist can work and why you may want to consider, with your In Sync AR builds, having an Optimist as a secondary AR. I know it's not good to have two of the same weapon type purely because, you know, you run out of ammo in longer Dark Zone runs, but in conflict games, you can absolutely, you know, get away with that. And it is a really good idea to do so as well. So let me know your thoughts on In Sync versus Optimist. I know a lot of people don't like it when I use the word nerf, but there is no sort of negative outlook on the word nerf or a developer applying a nerf if it balances the game out. Ultimately, balancing a game is what should always be the top priority to give everybody the best experience, and if that involves more nerfs than buffs or more buffs than nerfs, is completely irrelevant to me. I don't care if, you know, they nerf In Sync if it makes it maybe a little bit better or just the same level as Optimus, for example. Because then other talents become viable. I also wouldn't care if they buffed other talents to meet up to In Sync. You know, it doesn't really make a difference to me as long as a TTK is relatively unified across a lot of different talents, and you just use the talent that more suits your playstyle. I think that's better for the game. So yes, I do think In Sync needs a bit of a nerf. However, it definitely has its weaknesses, and that's just something you should all consider when putting your builds together. So yeah, I mean, I didn't really do much that game at all. We finished on 19 million damage of 4 kills, 0 deaths and 2 assists, which, you know, I suppose could be classed as a good game, but yeah, I don't think we had a particularly experienced other team there, so pretty poor matchmaking from Massive's point of view. But please let me know your thoughts. I'm curious on everybody's opinion on Optimist, on In Sync, on the general state of talents in the game and the balancing and so on. Please do let me know in the comments, and I'll do my best to respond to all of you. Don't forget to join the Discord server as well so we can discuss it even further there. Thanks again for watching, and I will see you all in the next video. Peace.